I think the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max are going to sell extraordinarily well. They've hit the right notes. The iPhone Air, I don't think it's going to be a blockbuster. Is it really worth all those trade-offs for something super thin?
An iPhone has reached the nearly $2,000 threshold. This is actually 300,000 Japanese yen. It almost sounds like the luxury brand products.
I think that the prices of phones are going to start going up substantially. 10 years from now, the base phone is probably going to be north of $1,000. You're going to have $2,000, $3,000, even $4,000 phones.
ワールドデコーダー始まります。今日のテーマは岐路に立つ iPhone です。日本時間9月10日、Appleが新型 iPhone を発表しました。iPhone 17、iPhone 17 Pro、そして新たにラインナップに加わった iPhone Air です。今回発表された新製品から見える iPhone の方向性、そして Apple が決して油断できないスマホの競争について Apple を世界の誰よりも深く取材するブルームバーグのマーク・ガーマン記者に話を聞きます。Okay, joining us from Los Angeles is Bloomberg's Apple reporter Mark Gurman. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
It must have been a very busy week.
It was a busy week. We had the Apple keynote on Tuesday, and obviously that's an all-day affair.
So Mark, you've been covering Apple for more than a decade, and another generation of iPhone just came out again. So could you quickly tell us what you thought about the event, and how would you describe the current iPhone era and Apple's history?
Yeah, the event was very interesting. The event, they focused very much on the hardware, the core features. They didn't get into anything that could become controversial. They didn't get into AI because that is only going to create a backlash, right? With Apple talking about AI and Siri and whatnot, it's just never going to go well. They just totally just threw that idea out the window, just focused on the products. So I thought that was very smart. The other thing they didn't do was get into pricing, or for that matter, make price increases of any substantial amount at this event. I think that eventually they're going to have to do some price modifications because of the incoming tariffs for exports from India, Vietnam, China in particular, Thailand, and the other South Asian countries. But they didn't get into it this time, right? They didn't want to overshadow the product news with new product pricing. And we all know that if they focused on pricing and they put new prices out, that would be the story of the event, not the new devices themselves. So it makes sense. Get the devices out, then deal with the price modifications later when they're actually going to have to start paying for those tariffs in the future.
Great, thank you. So we got so much to cover today. There are three things. One is what iPhone 17 and iPhone Air means to Apple. So we're going to do a quick recap of all the announcements and take a deep dive into each one of them. So second is Apple's 3-year plan to reinvent iPhone. As we already reported, Apple is working on the 3-year plan to revamp iPhone lineups. So we're going to take a closer look at why it matters. The third one is Google Pixel threatening iPhone. Google also just launched the new Google Pixel 10 at the end of last month. So Google touted its AI capabilities, but Apple didn't. Tim Cook mentioned Apple Intelligence only once during the event, so I will ask you if that's really threatening for Apple or not. So getting into the first part, what iPhone 17 and iPhone Air means to Apple. So first of all, iPhone Air, you have clearly seen this coming, and this is the first major new design in several years. And you said in the last video, Apple needed this because iPhone Mini and Plus are flops. So now that it came out, what do you say to the iPhone Air? Should we get it?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start. The iPhone 17 and the iPhone Air, they introduced a new era for the iPhone. The iPhone 12 era is finally over. And I look at eras based on designs and form factors. For some reason, they let the iPhone 12 design, it was excellent, I should say, linger for the last half decade. 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, they all use the same basic industrial design. They changed a couple things. Obviously, they added the dynamic island with the iPhone 14. And then with the iPhone 15, they moved to titanium, which obviously they've now reversed to aluminum. We'll get into that. But now, the iPhone Pro, that's an entirely new industrial design built around that aluminum unibody. The iPhone Air is also an entirely new design. So two brand new iPhone designs at one time. So this is a new era for the iPhone that is going to take them for the next half decade. Everything is going to be built around this new iPhone Pro design that will eventually come down to the regular iPhone 17s a couple years from now. They'll transition to another glassier design for the 20-year anniversary in 2027. But the iPhone Air is the beginning of a bunch of new thinner phones, eventually removing things like the USB-C port, getting even slimmer in some parts of the device, being able to pack more power into slimmer spaces, a focus on new battery technology, but opening up the door for new form factors like foldables. The iPhone Air is a test bed for the foldable iPhone, being able to miniaturize components to an entirely new level while packing in extreme amounts of performance. So I think there's a lot to like from what Apple did this year. I think the iPhone 17 Pro and Pro Max are going to sell extraordinarily well. I think there's going to be lines for these things. People are going to love the new orange color in particular on the Pro. I'm getting the orange Pro Max. Okay, I'm good with that. The iPhone Air, I think, is going to sell far better than the iPhone Plus and the iPhone Mini that it replaces, right? That fourth iPhone model. I don't think it's going to be a blockbuster, but I think it's going to create a halo effect for the iPhone line. It's going to be a marketing engine for the iPhone. It's going to bring people into Apple stores to check out the new models. I think they'll play with the Air for a little bit, realize some of the downsides, and then ultimately go for an iPhone Pro. But I think for Apple as a company, because it's a test bed and allows them to create these new technologies that are necessary for new form factors, and because of the marketing effect, plus because it will still sell better than the Plus and Mini, home run for Apple.
So do you think consumers really appreciate thinness, even though it compromises on battery life, audio, or camera?
I think we should first start off by talking about the compromises. The iPhone Air is $1,000, and it has a battery life that's equivalent to the regular 16 Pro, which in my testing is not that good, right? It's like, if you want good iPhone battery life, you're getting a Pro Max. This new Pro Max, the 17 Pro Max, 39 hours of video playback, unbelievable. Super pumped about that. What you have to understand is the battery is much thinner and smaller on this iPhone Air, which means it has that legacy level battery life. They quote it as all day battery life, but in reality, most people are gonna crush through that thing. So battery. The second drawback is the speaker, audio, as you mentioned. No speakers around the device or on the bottom. Instead, you have one speaker inside of the earpiece. That is a drawback for people who want to watch video without earbuds or listen to music without earbuds, right? The other thing, of course, is cameras. One rear camera versus 3 rear cameras on the 16 Pro and Pro Max, and 2 back cameras on the regular 17, okay? What you have to understand is that the amount of space that the processor and the battery and the engines and everything takes up means they could really only fit 1 camera in the 17 Air. So worse audio, worse camera performance, worse overall performance than a 17 Pro and 17 Pro Max, and also battery life. $1,000, the Pro is $1,100. They are selling a MagSafe battery. It's optional, but it's not really optional because you want real battery life. That's an extra $100. So really, you have these 2 phones side by side, a 17 Pro and a 17 Air, and they are the same price when you include that external MagSafe battery attachment. Why should you take the phone with all those downsides for real things? People listen to music and play video with their phones, they need to crush through their battery, and they want to take great pictures and they want the best performance possible. Is it really worth all those trade-offs for something super thin? I don't believe so, and I believe most customers, when they're presented with the facts, are going to make what I think is the correct decision and either get a regular 17 for a few $100 less or a 17 Pro. However, I think there are some markets that will be interested in this phone. Some fashion-forward markets like South Korea, even though it's a Samsung stronghold, I do think there are some Apple customers there. It could do well there. I also think it could do really well in China if the eSIM situation is figured out there. The one thing you have to note is that the Air is also eSIM only because there's not space to include a physical SIM card. That takes up a lot of real estate in the middle half portion of the phone. And so what you need to do in China is you need to go to a China Unicom store. It's the only carrier in China that supports eSIM, and you need to set up your iPhone Air in store. It's a bit of an arduous process. And so over time that will get rectified. Over time, they'll up the performance, the battery life, the camera technologies in this Air device. But for now, it's a pretty easy choice.
Does Apple expect high volume of production for iPhone Air in the first place?
I think they expect that it's going to do better than the Plus and the Mini, but based on my understanding, the vast majority of orders they place with suppliers are actually for the Pro and Pro Max. They're able to move very quickly. If somehow I'm wrong and they're wrong on their estimates for how well this thing is going to sell, they can pull a lever and relatively quickly ramp up production. But we'll see pretty fast when these iPhones go on sale for pre-order, how quickly they start running out of initial supply, and we'll know the demand pretty quickly, and they'll know exactly what they're going to have to do. Apple's going to be watching the Friday pre-order opening very, very closely to understand how it has to modify production for that device.
So launching the Air products reminds us of MacBook Air, which ended up being the top selling for Mac for many years. So does that eventually open the new path for iPhone?
I completely agree. This is the MacBook Air 2008 playbook all over again. The 2008 MacBook Air, it had some killer features that made sense for consumers. It had a big 13-inch display. It had a full-size keyboard. The equivalency to the iPhone Air is the iPhone Air has a full-size flagship 6.5-inch display, right? Very similar to the MacBook Air having a full-size display at that time with 2008. But the iPhone Air is also very pricey, right? It also lags in performance related to battery life and camera specifically. The MacBook Air in 08 had terrible battery life, was too expensive, and had terrible processing power, didn't have enough storage, you name it, okay? But what Apple did in 2010 was reinvent the MacBook Air. By that time, they were able to release a MacBook Air that came in at the same price, okay, as a baseline Mac, $1,000. They were able to up the performance to actually be in the right class of performance for a laptop, and they were able to make the battery life substantially better. So 2 years after releasing the MacBook Air, they were able to take that same thin form factor, but make it high performing, well priced, and have great battery life. As soon as Apple is able to release an iPhone Air with great battery life, great performance, high-end camera technology, they will do so, and that phone will be a smash hit. We're just not there yet, but they have to start somewhere. So I think this is a good start, and you're going to see it's going to take 3 or 4 generations, but eventually the iPhone Air is going to be a pretty hot phone.
Okay, so about the 17 Pro and Pro Max, you said it would sell really well. What made you think like that?
Well, the biggest driver of new iPhone generations are design changes. If you go back and think about the different success stories for the iPhones, you're thinking about the iPhone 4, brand new design. You're thinking about the iPhone 5, brand new design. The iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, much bigger screens, brand new design. You're thinking about the iPhone 10. You're thinking about the iPhone 12. The iPhone 17 Pro is really the true successor to the iPhone 12 line, because 5 generations later, this is a new industrial design. That is what is going to sell. It looks and feels completely different. And then you think of what the purchase drivers are for why people buy a new phone. They buy a new phone because they destroyed theirs and they broke it. So what's the 17 have? Much better durability. They buy a new phone because they want better cameras. What does the 17 Pro have? Much better cameras. They want a new design, has a much better design. And battery life, needing a new battery, is the single biggest driver for people, most people, to buy a new phone, the people in the mainstream. And these new phones have excellent battery life improvements. 6 hours, better battery life than the preceding generations on the Pros. Not to mention the new colors, which I think look pretty great. And so for all those reasons, they've hit the right notes. They've doubled down on the core competencies of the phones, and they doubled down on why people buy new phones. They hit everything consumers want or believe they're going to need in their devices. And so they've basically pushed away all the junk, okay? They took away the noise. They didn't focus on the bells and whistles. They just did the basics. They went down to the basics, and they're doubling down on what they're good at, and they're doubling down on hardware, and they're doubling down on what customers truly want. And so I think that's a success story. I think WWDC 2024, when they announced Apple Intelligence, where they made all these promises that turned out to be vaporware, it burned them terribly, and they don't want to make the same mistake. So they're sticking to the script, they're just doing what customers want, and they're going to be problem-free.
So they sure that the sticking to the basics would sell.
Oh yeah, I mean, you have to think about, what do consumers want? Like I said, they want camera, they want battery, they want durability, they want better displays. And so they're sticking to the basics there. And for people who don't want basics, for people who want something whimsical, a little bit out there, then you have the iPhone Air. You know, the one reason that I think the iPhone Air won't do as well as some may think is because the demographics of the users who want to buy an iPhone Air, I actually believe overlaps tremendously with the demographics of people who would buy an iPhone Pro or iPhone Pro Max. Think about it. It's influencers. It's people who want to post a lot to Instagram, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Fashion forward people. Well, you got the fashion forward colors on the iPhone Pro. You also have the better cameras. You have the better performance, right? And so it's like you're selling to the same market in many cases.
So about the pricing, which you briefly mentioned in the beginning, so people expected Apple's price hikes because of the tariffs, but the prices just changed moderately. So iPhone 17 starting price remains the same at $799. The cheapest Pro model is going from $999 to $1099, but it canceled a 128 gigabyte model. And iPhone Air is $999, which went up from iPhone 16 Plus that is supposed to be replaced. So what's the pricing strategy behind this?
I mean, right now, the pricing strategy is to create a little bit more cushion and a little bit margin. And so by eliminating that base storage tier, the $999 tier, and eliminating the 128 gigabyte tier and doubling that to $256 at the $1099, they're still getting a little bit of cushion and a higher margin there, which gives them flexibility when it comes time to actually raise prices in the next several months due to the tariffs. So I consider that what I call a silent price hike. And to your point, you also saw a silent price hike when it came to the iPhone Air. As you mentioned, the iPhone 16 Plus was $899. The Air that replaces it in the lineup is $100 more. And so it gives them that cushion as well. And if you remember earlier in 25, they announced the iPhone 16e at $600. That's not a very aggressive price point. That's a little bit more than it should cost. That felt like a tariff-induced price point. And so I think that price is gonna sort of stay where it's at. But I think these other models are subject to price increases, particularly on the Pro models. The other thing they did is they're going to raise ASPs overall, not only for going from the $899 to $999 on the Air, $999 to $1099 on the Pro. They added a new tier. There's a new Pro Max tier, not on the Pro, only the Pro Max, not in the Air or the base either. It's a $2,000, 2 terabyte tier. Some people are going to spring for that. People who want to use it for video recording, setting up professional video rigs, people who want to store an ungodly amount of photos and movies and games and what have you on their devices. They have that 2 terabyte tier. It's going to raise ASP slightly, I think.
That's the most expensive one that they announced this time. So you wrote in your article that it marked the first time that an iPhone has reached the nearly $2,000 threshold. This is actually 300,000 Japanese yen. It almost sounds like the luxury brand products, given that is what people carry around with them all the time. So what does this mean to Apple and the whole smartphone market?
Yeah, I think that the prices of phones are going to start going up substantially, whether it's tariffs in the next few months, whether it's a bigger push into more expensive technology like foldable phones, whether it's more technologies related to glass and facial recognition and cameras and other sensors, the price is going to keep going up. If you remember, the iPhone that came out in 2015, right? The base phone there was $650. Today, the base phone is $800, right? 10 years from now, the base phone is probably going to be north of $1,000. You're going to have $2,000, $3,000, even $4,000 phones. The price of these things is just going up substantially between tariffs, inflation, and technology. And for Apple, over the last decade, they really haven't raised prices despite all these new pieces of technology and the record levels of inflation we've had in the US in some prior years and in other countries as well. So it is almost a miracle that they weren't able to introduce price increases until a little bit in the distant future from now.
So iPhone was not the only product that they announced at the event. I thought AirPods updates were interesting, such as health tracking features like heart rate monitor or live translation. So earbuds in the headphone market has a lot of alternatives to AirPods, even for Apple users. So does that differentiate AirPods from others?
For me, the heart rate is the killer feature of the new AirPods. There are hundreds of millions of people who have iPhones that don't have Apple Watches, right? By introducing AirPods with heart rate monitors, they're able to bring more people into the iPhone ecosystem that are focusing on fitness. That does two things. One, it makes the iPhone stickier. The more people working out with their AirPods and their iPhones, the less likely they're ever going to leave for Android, and more likely it is they're going to upgrade to future AirPods and future iPhones. That's the obvious one. The second one is it gives them the lever for upgrades and gives them a lever for attachments. One, people really like the AirPods with heart rate. Maybe they'll check out an Apple Watch that, by the way, is much more expensive, that has all these health features on top of it, right? Two, it may push people to get Fitness Plus subscriptions for $10 US a month. That's one thing they touted in the keynote, how these new AirPods could work with the fitness app on the iPhone and your Fitness Plus workouts. So this is a driver for future upgrades, future attachments. There's a big marketing scheme behind this, and I completely agree with this business plan that they're pushing for these AirPods.
What about the Apple Watch? Any specific updates that stood out for you?
On paper, this Apple Watch upgrade is the biggest Apple Watch upgrade in 3 years. Not because they changed the design on anything, they didn't. There's not a substantial change to any of these products. But let's go down the line. The Watch SE 3, super impressive. For $250, you're adding new health things like wrist temperature and vitals and sleep score. You're adding an always-on display. You're adding their latest Apple Watch processor. It's a really good deal, and I don't see why anyone would buy a Fitbit or a low-priced smartwatch instead of that $250 Apple Watch SE. It's a really meaningful upgrade for that product. The Apple Watch Series 11 is kind of a throwaway. Same design as last year because of the substantial changes with the Series 10. They added 5G, which is completely worthless on a watch, so that's not a reason to upgrade, right? And then you look at the battery life improvement, 6 hours, 18 to 24 hours. That's nice. Now they can claim they have full day battery life. The Apple Watch Ultra upgrade to me is the second most interesting of the three watches. You're getting last year's display improvements that came to the Series 10. So you have a slightly bigger display on the Ultra 3. You have a new version of LTPO OLED technology. You have better viewing angles, brighter at different angles, which is really nice because this is a watch. You're wearing it out and about. You're wearing it outdoors. So I really like it from that standpoint. The satellite feature is going to create a lot of advertising that is going to sell this watch to hikers and explorers and adventurers and whatnot. And it's a direct hit against Garmin. They sell their Garmin InReach, which is their standalone subscription-based satellite product, and they're rolling out new smartwatches with satellite connectivity in the next few weeks here as well. So I think the Ultra 3 is pretty exciting. So overall, meaningful improvements to the Apple Watch. Of all the Apple Watch features they introduced, the best is hypertension detection. This is another one of these health features they rolled out. They did sleep apnea detection last year. This year they're doing hypertension. I think it's terrific if they get it to work properly. Hopefully it's a stepping stone. Just like sleep apnea detection was a stepping stone to sleep score this year. Hopefully by next year, the year after, we have actual blood pressure, systolic and diastolic readings. That would be really meaningful and very cool. And so the cool part about that is they are rolling out hypertension detection 2 years back. So if you have a brand new Apple Watch, either a Series 9, a Series 10, or an Ultra 2, so watches released since 2023, hypertension detection is a software upgrade to those watches as well, which is really nice. This is something that Apple could have reserved just for these newest watches, made it a marketing point, getting people to upgrade, but they chose not to. That lends me to believe that at least some of the things they're saying about wanting to help people and save people's lives with the Apple Watch are true, and it's not only about the money.
Thanks. So moving on to the next part, Apple's 3-year plan to reinvent iPhone. You've been writing that Apple is now going through a 3-year plan to revamp iPhone lineups. In the last video with us, you talked about foldable and 20th anniversary iPhones, which are expected within the next 2 years. So why does it matter to Apple? Why are they working on a 3-year plan?
Well, I'm calling it a 3-year plan, but really the point I'm trying to make, and this was written before this keynote this past week, 3 years in a row of really major upgrades. And it flies into the face. How many people are talking about how AI devices are going to take over the world, smartphones are dead? Apple's going in the completely other direction, believing that people are going to want a device like this in their pocket to be their main computing device. And so hitting the consumer base with rapid redesigns and revamps in a 3-year successive period, that is much needed, and that's going to be great for the company and great for the stock. Because if you remember, the last 5 years of the iPhone have kind of been a dud. They've done basically nothing of significance or substantialness since rolling out the 12 with 5G. They sort of hit their plateau on there, and then they sort of coasted the last few years. But now the engines are starting again, and that's pretty cool to see. Not only as someone who covers this stuff, but as a consumer.
So what do you know now about the foldable and what you call iPhone 20?
The foldable phone is basically like two iPhone Airs side by side, but with a foldable display. So they've slimmed down the battery technology, they improved the displays, they've improved the camera technology. It's gonna have Touch ID on the side versus Face ID because they quite frankly just can't fit it in. And I think it's gonna be a very nice, high-priced premium product, and I absolutely cannot wait to get one. The iPhone 20 is called the Glass Wing internally. It has curved glass on all the edges. It's going to be a nearly all-screen design. They're going to try to push the Face ID sensor under the display. They're going to attempt to squish the camera on the front under the display as well. We'll see if they're able to do that, but it's going to be a very, very advanced product. And so in 2027, there's going to be choices to make. Are you going to get the foldable or are you going to get the 20-year anniversary iPhone? Some people are going to want both. So we'll see what happens, but I'm very excited to see both when the time comes.
iPhone has been a very core product for Apple. They don't want to stick to the status quo. What do people inside Apple think about iPhones? What do you think they're trying to do?
They're trying to make the iPhone as sticky as possible. They're trying to make it as hard as possible to leave the iPhone ecosystem for Android or another technology ecosystem. But they're also trying to make it better. They're trying to fight this tidal wave of AI that's coming. And doubling down on the iPhone as the platform of today, but also the platform of tomorrow. And making it better and better and coming out with new form factors is clearly the angle. It feels like they finally realized they squeeze as much as possible out of this current iPhone form factor, and they have to try new things before they get jettisoned by the competition. And I think foldables right now, they're not the market leader in form factor. It's a very slim, it's only a couple percentage points, if not less than that, of the total market in terms of smartphone buyers. But I think eventually foldables, especially in this AI age, when people are going to move away maybe from laptops and desktops and they want something more powerful in their pocket, they're going to lean towards that foldable product.
Okay, for the last part, is Google Pixel threatening iPhone? So Google also just launched the new Google Pixel 10 at the end of last month. They were showing off the AI capabilities like voice translation on the phone call or camera coach, magic suggest, etc. So what's your take on Pixel 10 comparing to this iPhone launch?
I think I'm correct. The Pixel is pretty popular in Japan, right? Like I feel like Japan is like the biggest country for Pixel other than the US, right? I'd be curious to hear from you. What's the deal? Why is it such a big deal in Japan?
Oh, I think the A series really did well in Japan. After the launch of the A series, the shares of Google Pixel went up really rapidly. I think the cheaper option would resonate to people in Japan, and also they've been interested in Google's AI capabilities and whatnot, but I think the Pixel lines are too expensive for the users in Japan, I guess.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I don't think the Pixel is really threatening the iPhone. I think that the Pixel is sort of a hint at what would threaten the iPhone, and it's these AI-centric devices. Look, Google has done a better job than any phone maker, and I'm sure you can attest to this in Japan, at marketing their devices. I mean, their marketing is just amazing. It's brilliant. They're everywhere. They're throwing celebrities behind their devices, a bunch of new colors. It's just great. And it's not doing anything to create meaningful share. Other than the A series, what I've seen is the A series is actually performing pretty well in the US, in addition to Japan and other countries that you mentioned. But yeah, I don't see any threat to Apple from the Pixel. The threat to Apple are new age AI devices. Things maybe coming out of OpenAI with the partnership with Johnny Ive. Things coming out of Amazon down the road. But, you know, the Pixel, that's not going to be the product to take down the iPhone. As great as it is, it's the best Android phone by far, and if I was an Android user, I'd probably be using a Pixel.
So switching between the operating systems is not happening.
That's the problem. They make it so difficult to leave the Apple ecosystem. And that's one reason why they make the iPhone more valuable to your daily life year in, year out, and more indispensable. Fitness tracking, your keys for your house, your keys for your car, your wallet, your medical information, right? They've created this environment where it's like, you can't leave everything behind because you can't take it with you. So it's like, you may love the new Pixel and the new Samsung, and then you go down the road of trying to actually switch, and it's like, what am I even doing here? That can't happen.
I'm impressed that the YouTube creator Marcus Brownlee made a video about switching between iPhone and Android. That makes me think about, oh, maybe the people in the US thinking about this right now? Or what's your take on that?
Well, in terms of regulators, the regulators in the US, they haven't really hit Apple about the difficulty of switching. That's been an EU thing. And so you're going to see Apple need to make some tweaks to its operating system, iOS, in order to make it easier to switch to Google. But you can imagine they're going to make it as painful as possible, right? They're going to hit all the bullet points that the EU and other regulators are asking them to make, but they're still going to make it a challenge. And even if they do make it easy, right, that's going to require interoperability with Android. Not all their services are available on Android. Do you really want to leave things like iMessage and FaceTime behind? So they have all these levers that are just so easy for them to pull to keep people from leaving the ecosystem. And, is it really a regulator issue? Are they really doing it intentionally so people can't leave? Fine, but on the same time, their argument is they're just making their products better and making them more useful, more valuable, which is great. So it's like you can't really, say Apple's doing anything wrong here, right? So it is a very nuanced situation, if you ask me.
So what about the competition with Samsung?
Samsung's interesting. I've gotten my hands on the new Samsung Fold, the 7th generation Fold. Super thin, super fast, excellent performance, terrific cameras, beautiful design and colors, decent price point. That's a device. And so Apple's is really going to stack up against Samsung's Fold next year. And it's going to be interesting to see how they stack up. And it's going to be the most pure debate in terms of iOS versus Android, because the hardware functionality is going to be very on par next year. So I think Samsung is doing a good job on their foldables. It's interesting, before the iPhone Air launched back in May, they released their Samsung S25 Edge. And the S25 Edge, very much the same vein as the iPhone Air. It's a super slimmed down Galaxy S25, and it has not been performing particularly well. But then again, Apple's marketing engine, the way they push these things, the way they develop an even better product and their pricing and whatnot, lends me to believe that the iPhone Air is going to do better than the Edge. But the data we have so far tells us that customers are not rushing, right, to get that thin Edge phone. But perhaps Apple customers, more than perhaps, Apple customers are a little bit different. And I think a little bit more fashion forward, if I may say so myself, even though I wear a black shirt every day. And so I think the iPhone Air will be doing better than the S25 Edge, but not loads better.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Before I let you go, this is the last question. Speaking of the relationship between Apple and Google, you've been reporting that Apple is working to implement Gemini, Google's Gemini, into iPhone for the updated Siri. So is this really happening? What are you seeing right now?
So Apple's building a recreated version of Siri from the ground up in order to bring features to market that it delayed last year. 3 main features. 1, voice navigation for your phone through Siri. 2, the ability to fulfill queries by using on-device data, right, from your Apple account and your personal information. And 3, using on-screen content. There's a 4th thing they haven't announced, which is an AI web search tool, basically a search engine competitor to Perplexity and ChatGPT. And in order to bring those 4 things to market, the 3 delayed items and the 1 new item that I've reported on, they need to recreate the underpinnings, the foundation, the technology underpinning making Siri work, the foundation. And in order to do that, they're exploring using third-party large language models. Large language models is the technology that underpins AI or modern AI. Apple has their own foundation models, but in addition to those, they're exploring other foundation models. They've talked to OpenAI, they've talked to Anthropic, and they've talked to Google. Most recently, they asked Google's Gemini team to build a custom white labeled model for Apple that could run to power Siri on Apple servers. So it wouldn't necessarily be Gemini, it's just using that Gemini model technology to power Siri. So you're not going to get that Gemini functionality, you're not going to get Google services, but it's basically saying that Google's model technology, model development is better than the models we have here. Customers don't care. They just want this stuff to work. So we'll partner with whomever we need to partner with.
Do you think the updating Siri is on schedule?
Well, the original plan was to get it out at the end of 2024. Then they delayed it to March 2025, then April 25, then May 25. Then they delayed it indefinitely. And they still haven't said publicly when the new Siri is going to come out. All things that I'm hearing internally point to a release in March 2026. Let's see if they hit it.
So, thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. Love being with you guys. I have to visit Japan. I've never been to Japan. We'll have to go and hang out. So, looking forward to that day.
Oh yeah, you should come visit. Yeah, we'll be waiting. Thank you very much.